What's up, fellas? It's your boy Jay Trades back at it again with another video for today's trading day, September 20th of 2022. I'm just gonna go over a quick recap of a trade that I did go ahead and take today, and hopefully you guys are able to go ahead and get something out of this video and be able to apply it to future trades. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get started here. Today's video's recap is basically going to be a fib with a 5-minute impulse wave. I'm looking for the next impulse to go ahead and capitalize from the golden ratio, which is the 0.50, the 0.618, to the 1.272 fib. Fibonacci that's the extension, but you're looking for the retracement in regards to the entry. So here, starting off here first, looking at this chart from yesterday, it did go ahead and have a nice bullish price action here, right? It did go ahead and hit the top of this channel, this rising channel here, but today pre-market it did go ahead and made a gap in regards to the price action, which is obviously here. And it did also break down to the downside, right? So when a pattern does break to the downside, what are you going to basically look for, right? You're going to look for the retracement to then continue downward. That's essentially what you're looking for when you are looking for a pattern break for continuation, correct? And the higher time frames were also bearish in regards to the actual pattern itself as well. So looking at this here, obviously, let's go ahead and get started. This is a 15-minute chart, which I'm showing you. Let's go ahead and get it switched over to the 5-minute chart, right? This being said, so obviously gaps love to be filled, right? That's something that most of us know here in regards to the price action. When there is a gap, it's a high chance, or not the highest of chances, but it is a highly likely chance that it will be get filled, right? Especially when you have the 200 EMA above. And it's also, for instance, if you're looking for upward action from here for the bounce to the downside, which is basically that confirmation touch of the actual break of this pattern to then continue downward, right? So looking at this here, I look into 3 to 4 things in regards to when I'm looking for a trade, right? I'm looking at EMAs, right? I have the 9 EMA, which is this green EMA. The red EMA is a 20. This blue one is a 200, and this is VWAP, right? So that's one thing that I use for my trading, right? I use EMAs a lot, the 200, the 20, and the 9. I also look into VWAP, which is something that I focus on a lot. So for instance, when price action is above, I'm looking for bullish price action. When price action is below VWAP, I'm looking for bearish price action, right? Also, same thing goes with the 200. I applies to the same thing as well. That being said, the third thing that I do also go ahead and look for or use, I apologize, is Fibonacci's, right? The Fibonacci retracement extensions, that I do use that a lot in my trading. That's something that I use for key entries as well as key exits. So you're essentially looking for a 0.50 to a 0.618 golden retracement, right? Oh, misspelled my fault. And the target, which is the 1.272, right? So let's say, for instance, let's go ahead and plot. Just here is an example. So you're going to start it for upward action from, for instance, like you're looking for this price action to go ahead and hold at the golden ratio to then continue upward momentum, right? And you're going to start off with plotting it from the top to the bottom so you can get the 1 above and the 0 below. And that way you're looking for this impulse to hold. So I apologize, for this retracement to hold here in this area, general area, take an entry, and then take the impulse to the upside, right? So that's essentially how I use Fibonacci retracements and extensions combined with one another. And I also look a lot into the EMAs, right? So let's go ahead and get started into the actual price action, right? So first off, I can already tell that this is already, I'm noticing, for instance, a channel being made here, right? That's a channel being made. If you're not taking a look at the EMAs, I look a lot at what the EMAs are doing in regards to price action with confluence of one another, right? So for instance, price action here is extended from the EMAs. There's a nice sized gap in between the 9 and the 20 EMA. When the 20 EMA is above, that tells me that it's most likely bearish price action. When the 9 EMA is above the 20 EMA, for instance here, that's bullish price action for me, right? So taking a look here, obviously there is a gap between the price action and the EMA, as well as the actual gap between the EMAs themselves, right? You have VWAP being held as resistance here with this price action. Let's go ahead and take a look. So this right now is just this actual pattern right now, which is the falling channel here. Let's go ahead and keep on playing. As you're noticing, price action is getting much closer to the actual 9 EMA, right? Price action is extended from the EMA. It's getting much closer. Let's go ahead and take a look at what does continue to happen here, right? So for instance here, right away, right, you're noticing already hammers being made. Hammer, 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 or I apologize, a doji, a doji. So that's already a good indication of buyers stepping in within this area here. So this area here is for buyers, right? Obviously you have this gap upward here with the supply zone above as well, right? So here, let's go ahead and take a look at what happens with price action. It's still being respected here. And now what you're noticing is that it starts breaking above the actual channel itself, right? So now what's next, right? If it begins to start breaking out of an actual pattern, I focus a lot of my market analysis when it comes to TA. I go ahead and basically play off of this, right? So a pattern is essentially just congestion, right? And the market moves in two ways, which is a corrective manner and an impulsive manner, right? So it's a pattern breakout, pattern breakout, pattern breakout. That's what it does over and over and over and over again, right? So here, for instance, it's a pattern congestion to then look for the impulse, right? Impulse breakout, right? So that is something that I do go ahead and look for in regards to the way the market is moving. So here it already is a pattern, right? It's a channel. It's obviously breaking out of here with the EMAs being basically broken through in regards to the 9 EMA and VWAP. You notice VWAP was being held as resistance and now it's being broken through. Let's go ahead and take a look at what continues to happen, right? Now, the 9 EMA, I apologize, the 20 EMA is also being broken into, right? Because it's the follow through of the breakout. So in regards to the breakout, like how I explained earlier, that you're essentially looking for that retest of the breakout to continue downward. I already have a clue that this is the essentially where I want to look for the retest of this bigger pattern, right? So for instance, this big pattern here to then continue downward, right? It has to come up here, for instance, or not necessarily essentially touch the actual trend line, but within this zone here to then continue downward momentum, right? So having that in mind, let's continue looking at price action here, what it continues to do. So for instance, here now, it begins to hold the 9 EMA as support, right? Above VWAP. It closed above the 20 EMA. So essentially now what I'm going to look for is to plot some fibs, right? I'm going to plot fibs so I can look for a golden ratio hold within this area, right? The golden ratio, how I explained earlier, entries at the 0.50, 0.618, targets 1.272. Exactly here how I have it, right? So let's go ahead and take a look. It's especially price action is above VWAP now, right? So let's go ahead and continue looking at this price action. Oop, let me move that, I apologize. Right, so we have that impulsive right there, that impulse right there. So let's go ahead and get this moved up now that we have this impulse here. Price action is still being held. Notice the gap between the EMAs, right? Very, very good size gap. As price action begins to break through and hold the 9 EMA, the EMAs begin to tighten up. So now you're noticing that the EMAs are actually very, very tight here at this area, right? So that's a good indication that, for instance, if for price action to turn, for instance here, right? When the 20 is above the 9, bearish. When the 9 is above the 20, bullish, right? So right now, technically, the 9 is still above. The 9 is below the 20 EMA. So for instance, so for this, what essentially this 5 minute EMA theory impulse does tell me is that the next step is, now that it has broken through, is for these EMAs to flip. So essentially for that to happen, right? So you're looking for the 20 EMA to go downward and the 9 EMA to go upward, right? So let's go ahead and take a look into price action and begin looking at that EMAs. But you're noticing the EMAs are becoming very tight and price action is being held above, right? And above VWAP as well, which is essentially what I do also look for in regards to above, bullish, below, bearish. Let's continue to look to play this out. As you're noticing here, look where it came down to. I apologize. My head didn't move that, but look where it came down to, right? The golden ratio, which is right above VWAP. Now you have a pattern here, right? You have a pattern, which is a flag essentially. So you have the flag, which is for me after a breakout is a continuation. That's a continuation pattern for me. As you're noticing, it's being held at the EMAs, right? Price action, you have a doji. This is just indecision in this area, right? Buyers and sellers are just battling out in this area. But mind you, it is above VWAP, but below the actual 200 EMA, right? So let's go ahead and continue playing out, right? This is a great spot for an entry, right? Let's say you go ahead and enter here, right? You have VWAP as a risk. You have the actual golden ratio as another risk as well, right? So for instance, if it breaks to the downside, so for instance here, right? If we're gonna go ahead and plot a long position, right? You enter there. Let's say you have VWAP as your actual risk, right? Let's say once it breaks VWAP, you hit like, hey, I'm out, right? So for instance, look at that type of stop, right? You're risking 0.03% of SPY's actual price to a reward of 0.41% in regards to the actual price of SPY. But let's say even the golden ratio, right? Look at that. The risk to reward is amazing here. You're looking at a target of almost $1.50, almost $1.50. Well, not almost. It is $1.58 here. So for instance, that's already a great risk to reward trade, right? You have the confluence of the breakout, the EMAs, the VWAP is below. It's being held at the golden ratio. Let's go ahead and continue playing this price action to see what begins to happen, right? All right, perfect, right? Price action now begins to start breaking out of the actual continuation pattern, which is the actual flag pattern. Take a look at the 9 and the 20 EMAs, right? The 9 and the 20 EMAs are getting very, very tight here. Now, that's a good indication of an actual flip from the 9 going from below to above and the 20 from above to below, right? So you got an entry at the golden ratio. It's being held. Let's continue to go ahead and continue playing the actual price action. Bam, right? You have, for like I stated, the gaps love to be filled, right? So as soon as this starts breaking within the supply zone, momentum will go ahead and gain quick in regards to the actual pattern. So for instance, you want to go ahead and get in here. You're not trying to get in here, right? Because at this point, you're already chasing what the buyers are that bought here, right? For instance, and look at the EMAs. The 9 is above the 20. So that's already a good bullish indication as well, right? It held the golden ratio above VWAP, and you have this gap to be filled, right? And also keep in mind this higher time frame pattern that you're looking for a retracement back into it to a retest to then continue downward because it is an uptrend. This is a rising channel. When it does break to the downside. So for that is an actual higher time frame pattern that's currently going on. So let's go ahead and continue, right? Bam, right? You're looking for that target, the 1.272. That's exactly, you're looking for a golden ratio entry to a 1.272 target, right? So essentially, that's the trade right there for you, right? You can allow this to, for instance, if it does another pattern here and it wants to continue, you can essentially play that as well. But the main targets from the Fibonacci retracement to the extension is from the golden ratio to the 1.272. That is something that I use a lot and a lot and a lot to go ahead and get great trades. You're in this here, you're gaining that impulsive. The IV is spiking up on options. So that's where you want to get in, right? You don't want to get in when the price action is spiked. You want to get in when price action is chilling. That way you're getting at a nice decent price, right? and then are able to go ahead and take this impulse and be able to make money off of that impulse, right? So let's go ahead and continue looking at price action and see what it does, right? Keeping in mind that this is basically that retest of the higher time frame, right? So essentially this, right? So that's essentially the retest in regards to the actual target itself of the actual area within the retest area, right? You have the 200 EMA above, which is also a great magnet when it comes to price action, as well as the top of the gap, which also is a great target as well in regards to price action when you're looking to get filled. But let's go ahead and continue here, right? Let's see where it gets. For instance, here price action now is being retraced downward. It basically essentially touched that trend line perfectly, right? So then let's go ahead and continue. Okay, right? Like your target was the 1.272. Here, unfortunately, it did not continue upward. It did not hit the 200 EMA or it filled the gap. But what it did do is play along with this higher time frame pattern. So that's essentially what you're looking for. Great trades. You got the entries, well-defined entries, and a target that you could potentially target the 200 EMA, the top of the gap, this actual retest of the actual pattern, or the 1.272. I personally always start scaling out at the 1.272 because that's essentially my target, right? When I do see that higher time frame price action is on my side, I will let it go ahead and get start playing along with the actual trend to the upward action, right? But unfortunately, here price action was bearish, right? Due to the fact that you have this pattern, it broke out the retest to continue downward, right? Let's go ahead and continue playing, right? It broke downward, right to the golden ratio. But that's essentially what you're looking for. That was a great trade that I did go ahead and take. I went ahead and close my options in this area here and that candle when I noticed that it did hit the 1.272 and it had also this higher time frame pattern. And that's a great trade for today for September 20th of 2022. Stay tuned. The compound trading is coming big. Let's get it.